Good evening. I hope you're all doing well. Today we're learning Maseches Shavuos Daf Yud Aleph. We're starting 2/3 of the way down on Yud Amud Beis, and we'll be going about 2/3 of the way down on Yud Aleph Amud Beis, and then I'll call it a wrap. We will be in the middle of a sugya at that point, but it just carries over to the next plot. As a general rule, something that you were makdish can be redeemed. There are two different categories of hektish in this regard. One is hektish damim. I'm makdish this shulchan, and I can just financially say, I changed my mind. Here's the cash, and then the table comes back without kedusha. However, where there's kedushas haguf, let's say fundamentally it's an animal, it's something like that. There we don't treat it as damim. Kedushas haguf, we have to wait until there's a mum. We have to wait until the animal gets a mum, and then it can't be used as a korban anymore. Then we sell it, and then the cash, and then that's how we do our redeeming. However, there's an exception to this rule, and that is that when it's a korban tzibur, when it's something that's used for the tzibur, we don't have to wait until there's a mum. That's the din that we're starting with, a very kodshim-esque type of halacha. It's a good prep. We're going to be jumping into kodshim over the next couple of months. Amar Ula, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Tmidin shelo hutzrechu letzibur. Let's say that there were tmidin, korbanos for the korban tamid, that we thought we were going to need for the tzibur, but we no longer need for the tzibur, niftin tmimin. We can do the padiyah tamimin. We don't have to wait for a mum. Right? This is the din that we're talking about today, is that when it comes to even when it's kedushas haguf, it's kedushas haguf, it's a hektish beguf. So normally we'd say we have to wait for a mum, not when it's for the tzibur. When it's for the tzibur, the din is different, that you can be poda, you can redeem, even when it is a tamim, which is a chiddush. Yasiv Rabba v'ka'amar la lahashmaisa. Rabba loved this Dvar Torah, and he was sharing it at his Shabbos table. Amar le Rav Chizda, man sayis lachlu Rabbi Yochanan Rabbach. Well, nobody's going to listen to you. Who's going to listen to you with this ridiculous din? V'chi kedusha shebahen lehechan holcha. How did you remove the kedusha? It has kedusha saguf. It's a cow. It's for a korban. It's korban tamid. What did you? There's a mechanism at play here. How do we remove the kedusha? You give cash? No, by kedusha saguf, even if it's for the tzibor. But what are the mechanics that removes the kedusha of that kedusha saguf of that cow? Amar le ad lo tizbara. Don't you hold the lo amrin kedusha sheban heichan halcha? We don't ask that question. Hatznan, we have a mishnah. Why do we know that it's okay by a korban tzibor or by something for the tzibor that we could remove it? We could remove the kedusha. Where do we learn this from? From the world of Torahs. Says the Gemara B'Hatnan, this is a Mishnah in Krisus, Mosar HaKtores, when there was extra Ktores, and we have this actually in Korbanos, Melo Chofna B'Yom HaKippurim, Machzir in the Maseches, right? The Mishnah is that the Korbanos in the morning. So Pam L'Shivim Shana Haisa Aval Shel Shiraim Chatzoin. So there it discusses that you take things maloch afnav, fine. So then in that whole discussion by the Ktores, the Mosar Ktores Maha you osinba, what would you do with the extras? Oh, so that's Kedusha Saguf, right? That's something that's fun, or maybe it isn't, but that's not how I mean is that Kedusha Saguf. Says the Gemara, Mafrishin mimena schar ha'umnin. We figure out how much the workers in the who make the Ktores. This is actually the name of the family is the Avtinas family. They were the master Ktores people. So we figure out what they're owed, and then and then we deconsecrate the Ktores. And then we have to redonate all of the monies in order to rekindle and to replenish, I should say, the new Ktores for the next year. So what does that show you? It shows us that seemingly there's no problem with being poda something when it's for the tzibur. But why would that be true? But we don't see that argument applies. So what happened earlier? Rav Chizda said to Rabbah, I don't understand. How can you get rid of the kedusha? Well, why didn't the Mishnah and Krisos say the same exact thing? Elamai, it must be that it's okay to remove kedusha even without waiting for something to go bad, because we see that by the Ktoras. That's the Gemara, bottom line of Yonah Beis Amar Lake. Torah's Kamris. You can't ask from the Ktoras. Shiny Ktoras, because while you might have thought, and Rashi on the bottom of the page here calls this out, the Salka Daitach, you might have thought, Rashi says, that this was Kedushas Haguf, says the Gemara on the top of the page, the Kedushas Damim, who really, you can't ask from Ktoras. Not because you can't be Podek Ktoras, but because it's not apples to apples. You were asking about a case of Ula and Rav Yochanan, which was talking about Kedushas Haguf. By Kedushas Haguf, if I'm makdish a korban to be a korban tamid, I'm allowed to redeem that animal if it's for the tzibur, even without a mum. You can't ask me from Ktoras. Ktoras is not apples to apples because the din of Rav Yochanan was by Kedushas Haguf, but the Ktoras is Kedushas Damim. Kedushas Damim totally is not the same set of halachos. It's apples to oranges, and therefore no comparison. Yela me'ata. If what you're saying is true, that the Ktores is Kedushas Damim, this lower level of Kedusha that can just be redeemed by cash, Elameata lo tipasel betvul yom, then I might have thought that if in fact Ketores has a lower status of Hektish, it's not Hektish Aguf, it's Hektish, it's not Hektish, it's not Hektish Aguf, it's just Kedushas Damim, it's a lower level. Well, if that's true, then it should not become puzzle with a Tvul Yom. Let's remember, a Tvul Yom is one of a host of many people who've gone to the mikvah already, but they went during the day. And the halacha is that they're tamei until nighttime, until Erev Shemesh. So if a Tvul Yom touches the Ktores, if it's Kedushas Damim, the Tvul Yom shouldn't be able to be matame. Allah Matanya, why do we then have a brisa that says, Nasna b'machteshes nifseles b'tvul yom? If you want to tell me that the Ktores is the lower level of Kedusha, it's Kedushas Damim, then it should not be puzzle with a Tvul Yom. Yet the brisa says, nifseles b'tvul yom. Maybe you want to say, maybe we were wrong. All Kedushas Damim, even though it's the lower level, all Kedushas Damim are going to be puzzled. That's mamish not true. That's not. When it comes to the Korban Mincha, flour offerings, you can do Me'ilah once it's been Mukdash. Kidshu B'Kli, once it became sanctified in a Kli, once it's put into a Kli, then and only then it becomes subject to the Tuma of the Tvul Yom. Look at the Diuk. Kidshu B'Kli in, lo Kidshu B'Kli lo. It's not inherently the case that Kedushas Damim is going to be puzzled B'Tvul Yom. That's not true. This case was unique in that it happened to be put into a Kli Shares, and that's why it got that new higher level of Tuma. But a Kedushas Damim in general, it's not going to be subject to the Tuma of a Tvul Yom. So Elamai, if you're saying that the Ktores is not going to be the Tvul Yom, the Kedushas Damim case, you want to say that the Ktores is Kedushas Hagufi, that's also problematic. Elamayata, if in fact the Ktores is Kedushas Haguf, then it should be that tipasel belina. Then it should become tamei, it should become pasel, I should say, just by having left it overnight. But that's not true. Alamatnan, why is it that we learn in Maseches Me'ilah? We're not going to go through all of the 10 cases that are about to be listed. Hakometz, which is grabbing a certain amount of with your hand, alavona, adding the frankincense, vaktoris, all the select spices, uminchas kohanim, uminchas kohen mashuach, uminchas nesachim. We're not going to go into that. In all of those cases, moal and behen mishok. Sure, yes, there is me'ilah once they are mukdash. But look at this. Kidshu b'kli, if it is put into a kli shares, and now this korban mincha has been elevated to a higher level, then and only then, once it's put into a kli shares, where do we see the din of lina when it comes to a korban mincha? We see it only once the flour has been put into a kli shares. Kidshu b'kli in, lo kidshu b'kli lo. And if the Ktores is Kedushas Haguf, it should have had a din of lina, which it doesn't. Says the Gemara, again, apples and oranges. We're a little bit more than halfway down. Omar le lino ka'amris. You can't ask me about lina. Shiny Ktores, hol v'tzurasa v'chol hashana kula. If you leave a korban out overnight, slowly but surely, it would not be edible. We don't leave chicken out overnight. So let's say you made a chicken on Friday night, and you know what, you're a little lazy, you don't want to go in the kitchen after dinner, you're tired, you fell asleep on the couch. If you leave the chicken out overnight, do you eat it in the morning? No, that's kind of gross. What about the Ktores? It's made out of spices. It's dry. There's no decomposition in 12 hours, in 24 hours, maybe even in a year. If you have a well-mixed and a non-moist powder, it's not going to cake up, it's fine. So the Gemara says, you can't talk about lina, about something getting ruined overnight, when that thing is not ruinable. It's just Torah, we have flour. Sometimes we've left our sugar uncovered. Okay, make sure there's no bugs in it, and shall move on. Move on. So says the Gemara, you can't ask anything from that world. Mikol Makom, says the Gemara, there still is one question, Kasha. What are the mechanics as to how it works? Let's go back to our din that we started with. What did Ula say in the name of Rabbi Yochanan? That let's say the animal that's set aside for a korban tamid that we no longer need, it can be niftet even as a tamim. So the Gemara says, fine, I get you, maybe you're right. How does it work? Mikol Makom Kasha, v'chi kedusha shebahen leheichan halcha. If you were, in fact, makdish, an animal, for the sake of a korban and tamid, and now you don't need it anymore. Rav Yochanan, let's assume you're right that you can redeem it. Let's assume you're right you can redeem it without waiting for a mum. Fine, I'll give it to you. How does it work halachically? Why is it that the fact that it's a din in tzibur means that you now don't have to wait for a mum? If it's kedushas haguf, the higher level, you need to wait for a mum. I did in tzibur. So what? What does it have to do with anything? The fact that you have a din tzibur changes the korban? The korban should still have to have a mum. So the Gemara here teaches a big chiddush. Amar Rabba. Rabba says, and this is a Gemara that we saw in Maseches Ksubis. I don't remember it at all. Leiv Bezdin Masne Aleim. The heart of Bezdin builds in a condition. Meaning, there's an automatic condition. We assume a certain pattern of thinking. And here is the presumptive distinction of our mindset. It's assumed. You don't have to say it. Im hutzrechu. If the korban tamid is going to be needed, then the korban tamid is going to be needed, and it's kedushas haguf. Ve'im lav yehyulid mehen. But if I don't then need that korban, I can redeem it like any inanimate object, a table, a chair, a coat, doesn't matter. And all I have to do is give money, they give me back my item, and the kedusha is then reduced. So Rabbah is giving us a massive chiddush. Rabbah is explaining the essence of Rav Yochanan. Again, let's just say this super clear. Rav Yochanan started off the day today with his din that a korban, which really should be kedushas haguf, can be redeemed even if there's no mum, as long as it's a din and sibur. Why is that true? But Rabbah says there's a built-in condition. If in fact it ends up going to the mizbech, it's kedushas haguf. But if in fact we end up not needing it, by definition it's kedushas damid. Says the Gemara, Omar le Abaye. Abaye says to Rabbah, in fact, some actually say it's Rava, because the timing does make a little bit more sense. Abaye and Rava often speak more. I actually don't have a correction in my Gemara, but do you have a correction there by Omar Rabbah, 6 lines from the bottom there? Huh?
No.
So in the shiur that I was listening to, he said some people say Rava. I didn't see that.
Usually by Rava are Balei Plukta.
They are Balei Plukta. Rabba was 1 generation earlier than Abai. He was a 3rd century Amora, and Abai and Rava were 4th century Amora. I don't know what their relationship was though. Rabba and Rav Yosef were the same generation, and Abai and Rava were also the same generation. So says the Gemara, V'ha marhu de Amar, you yourself said, you, Rabba/Rava, you said something that doesn't work with your Leiv Bezdin Masna Aleim. Let's see what it was.
I wonder if
the Gemara over there says Rava.
Addressed in Mar. No, in fact, he addressed him Marhu to Amar, just and respectfully. Shows that it is Rava. Not Rava. It would have been right, because they're contemporaries. Interesting. Maybe.
That's a good diuk. I wonder if what he would have said to Abai.
I'm not sure.
We would have
That's
said to
why I
him.
say maybe. Not positive.
Very good.
How Abai and Rav thought.
It's going to be in your Sefer Divrei David. You have to. Did you finish yet, or did you not start? Where are you holding?
No, I have 1 item, so.
You have a lot more than 1 item. You're being humble. You're being humble. So says the Gemara. Rabbah says, hold on, not Rabbah. Abaye says you can't believe in that principle that Leiv Bezdin Masna Aleim, that we have this built-in distinction of kedushas guf versus kedushas damim. Why not? Because hikdish zachar ledamav kadosh kedushas haguf. Just very simple. Do you see a distinction here? No. It's just kedushas haguf. No distinctions are made. Says Gemara, lo kasha. Ha da amar lidmei ola. It depends on how you consecrate this item. If you consecrate it as an ola, then that's going to be kedushas haguf, nothing to talk about. And ha da amar lidmei nisachim. It's where you qualify and say, no, 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 I'm giving the animal, but it's only nisachim. Esve Abaye says, all right, I gave you an easy one because it was from the Amoraim. Now let's pull from the Tanoim. Esve Abaye says from a Gemara Maseches, Yoma, Par v'sa'ir sheyom kippurim. The cow and the seir, the korban musaf that we spoke about extensively over the last couple of days, Shem Kippurim, she'ovdo, it was lost, v'hifresh achem tachteim, and then they got the replacements. So I had cow number one and seir number one, and I lost them and I replaced them. V'chein seirei avodah zara she'ovdo. If I lost the seir that needed to be brought for avodah zara, and then v'hifresh acherem tachteim, and then we find the original ones, top of Yud Aleph Amud Beis, Kulan Yamusu, Divi Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda holds that all of those need to die. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon Omrim, Yiru Ad Sheyistavu. No, they don't need to die. You need to wait. They need to go grazing until they become Yistavu, until they become Tameh, the Aramaic word for Tameh. V'yimkor, and then sell it. V'yiplu dmei l'nedava, and then the monies have to then go to nedava. She'ein chatas tzibur mesa. So says the Gemara, ve'amai. Why is it, Reb Shimon, that you would have to say yiru ad she'istavu? Think about what we learned. It's a korban, and it should have the principle of leiv bezdin masna. So if leiv bezdin is masna, we don't need the korban anymore. Why are you saying yiru ad she'istavu? That makes no sense. Say, lei bezdin masne. I can just be podeh. I don't have to wait for there to be any mum. V'amai, lei bezdin masne alein. It says the Gemara, not a good question. Yud Aleph Amud Beis, another 15 lines or so to go. Avudin ka'amris. You're asking me about a case of an item that was lost? Shiny avudin de lo shchichit. The rule of Rabbah, that leiv bezdin masne alein, that if it's for Kodesh, then great. If it's Kedushas Haguf, then great. And if I need to redeem it, that means it's for Kedushas Damim, then I can redeem it. That doesn't apply in a case that's Lo Shchiach. And the case of losing the par v'sar of Yom Kippur and replacing them is taka very rare. You have to be an impressively poor Kohen to lose the par of Yom Kippur. That's a 2,000-pound animal. And okay, maybe the other one got mixed up with the little one, the sheep. No problem, fine. You're not losing these animals. They were very misudar over there. Says Gemara, hold on one second. You said that by the world of Avudin, that we don't say lei bezin masne. Hold on. Hare para, the para aduma de lo shchicha. And in fact, the para aduma was a very rare animal. We've only had a handful of them in Jewish history, really less than 10. I think it's 7 is the actual number that we've ever really had. Tanya, what do we see over there? Para niftes al kol psul sheba. A para, if it has a psul, it can be niftes. That's normal. Mesa tifte, if it dies, it can be redeemed. Nishchata tifte. And if it gets slaughtered, it can be redeemed. Now, this din is our din. Matza acheres na'ahe mena. Let's say I have cow number one, and it's a beautiful cow, and it's a para aduma. But I find an even more beautiful. Is there a mum in the first one? No mum in the first one. I found one that's better than the first one. So I'm going to switch it out. Tifte. That's going to be our case. That sounds just like Rav Yochanan. And then lastly, in the Brisa, shachta al gabe ma'arachasa, ein la pedia olamis. If in fact it was shechted on the pyre, on the mizbeach, then there's nothing you can do. So what do we see over here? We see over here that we applied the rule of if you don't need it and it's for the tzibur, then you can redeem it without a mum, just like Rav Yochanan. Hi, but you said that we don't have the din of bezdin mas of lei bezdin mas in the case of avudin, but the case of paradum over here is you lost it, and therefore we see that you do apply the din of lei bezdin mas by avudin. As a Gemara, shiny para. No, bad question again. Why? Because the category of kedusha of the para aduma is unique. 1/3 of the way down, a quarter of the way down. Yud Aleph Amud Beis. Shani para de kodshe bedek habayisi. This is unbelievable. Halacha is so dak. all the korbanos in general are considered to be kedushas haguf, not the para aduma. The para aduma is more like a tool. It's unique. It's mechudash. It's unique in that it is koche bedek abayis. It's not kedushas haguf. It's koche bedek abayis, which is no different than tiles, new paint. It's an object that's used in the Beis HaMikdash to solve other problems. It does not have the din of kedushas haguf. Says the Gemara, Ihachi, if in fact it's kedushas damim and it's not kedushas haguf, mesa unishchata tifte, if what you're saying is that it can be redeemed, well, that's a big problem. If something was nishchita and now you want to say tifte that it can be redeemed, we have a technical issue of haba'inan ha'amada v'ha'aracha. Normally, when we have something that is going to be redeemed, we stand that animal in front of those who are misha'er the costs of that animal, and we ask them to do an assessment. It's like taking your car in for an evaluation. They look at the odometer, they look at all the scratches, they make sure they're small, or whatever, they look inside, any wear and tear. So what you need to do in order to be poda something is stand up the animal in front of the evaluators. It's only one problem. The case was nishchita. And if in fact we're saying that the para aduma is kedushas damim, then it needs ha'amada v'ha'aracha. It needs to be stood in front of these evaluators and get assessed. But you can't do that in the case of nishchita. Says the Gemara, don't worry. Hamani, Reb Shimon he, the Amar Koche Mizbeach hayu bichlal ha'amada v'ha'aracha, Koche bedek habayis lo hayu bichlal ha'amada v'ha'aracha. The requirement to stand an item in front of the evaluators and get it evaluated, that was true by Koche Mizbeach, by Koche Aguf. However, when it comes to the para aduma, which is in the category of bedek habayis, and you want to be podeh, there is no din of ha'amada v'ha'aracha. And therefore, we're still good to go. We're still staying stark here that the para aduma is a din in koche bedek habayis or koche damim, and therefore it can be redeemed. And therefore, it's not a question on anything earlier. Hold on one second. You're saying that we hold like Reb Shimon, that by koche bedek habayis, there's no ha'amada v'ha'aracha. Reb Shimon, if in fact that's true, then Ema Seifa, we have a problem with the next part of the brayso that doesn't agree to Reb Shimon. What does it say in the Seifa? This is a couple of steps here. The brayso that we have earlier in the name of Reb Shimon says, Shacht al gabe ma'arachasa, that if it's shechted, ein lo p'tia olamis. So that's what our brayso says, but that's going to be problematic for Reb Shimon. Why? Because v'hatanya, the brayso says, Reb Shimon Omer, para mitama tumas ochlin. A para can create tuma if it's eaten incorrectly. Hol v'hayasalah shas hakosher, because at one point it had a shas kosher. I'm not going to quite dig into that nekuda. V'amar Reish Lakish, Omar Hayar Reb Shimon, para niftes al gabe ma'arachasa. Reish Lakish says, explaining Reb Shimon that the para is niftes even if it's shechted on the ma'aracha. But our brisa says that a para isn't niftes. So if our previous brisa says Reb Shimon, then the seifa of that brisa is so ser another din of Reb Shimon, then the reisha can't be Reb Shimon. So says the Gemara, and with this we're going to close. No, you can't learn anything from the para aduma in this regard. Elishani para hol v'dameha yikarin. There's a totally different din going on over here because of the cost of a para aduma. Supply and demand, one of the most basic rules, and therefore you cannot ask from this world. Tomorrow we're going to start with an Amar Mar, with an analysis of something that we learned, but for now, we'll pause right here at Yud Aleph Amud Beis, 2/3 of the way down at the words Amar Mar, wishing you all a beautiful night.